Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
Girl, real talk. This whole "it's new year, time to reinvent myself" trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
A note to listeners. The following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
But you won't call it a homicide. You know, you're killing this. You're just killing this case. You can't move it forward.
The guy that was in the jail had given him the tip that that's where the body or something was. They were going to send the boat out with I think it was like a sonar or something that would scan the bottom.
To be at a place where a murder case could be potentially resolved and the bodies found was interesting. Eerie. I would say it was definitely eerie.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman.
Last week's episode was very intense, and we have some updates.
One of the things that we found out through our sources is the gun that was given to PAULA by the possible eyewitness, a .357 Magnum handgun, which PAULA gave to the Love County Sheriff Department immediately after it was given to her, was not tested forensically by the OSBI. In fact, what our sources tell us is that it was never given to the OSBI, and then was returned to its original owner.
We have left several messages for the new Love County Sheriff, Andy Cumberledge, and we would love to speak to him and clarify this information, but he has yet to respond to us. We have been sorting through dozens of tips, and today we're going to read one from an anonymous source that coincides with the eyewitness statement from last week.
The information you are about to hear was corroborated by two sources who we know are very credible.
I'm going to read it now. A couple of days after the chase, a teenager called Love County Sheriff's Department and requested to speak with a deputy, saying that he had to report a crime he witnessed. When he sat down with the deputy, he said that he went with his friend to get a boat, and he saw a guy tied up and a girl tied up screaming for help. He said that some guys came at him with guns and told him to leave or else they would kill him. He told the deputy he was scared because he hadn't heard anything from his friend since then. The deputy told Joe Russell about this, and Joe said that the boy was making up the story. That teen would now be an adult. If that person is listening, we beg you, please give us a call.
In today's episode, we're going to be speaking with Jackie Bates. He's the law enforcement officer who came on to reinvestigate this case. He's the one who filed the search warrant that was denied. And we're going to check in with him to see what he has heard since he was last on the podcast.
I know. I think we all agree, and I think most of the people that have been listening to the podcast who've heard your investigation story and your warrant story and what you did in order to get that warrant realize that this is ridiculous and why that thing was rejected. My question to you, though, is since you've been on the podcast, have you received any blowback from anybody about what you said? You basically told us everything that went on, and you seemed very, and you still do, you seem very dejected about this because you just feel like there are answers out there and no one's willing to go out to get them.
They don't seem, there's other cases. There's fresher cases that they just don't. I mean, I know they care, but they're not going to do the work. This case requires some work. The fact that it's 9 years later, that makes it a little more complicated. But, and my concern is this. There was enough probable cause to look there. And if they died of exposure and that's where they're at, you are never going to solve this case interviewing anybody because it's all wrong. And we'll never get the answer. And if they were murdered, because that's where they were, I think the evidence is pretty solid that's where they were. If they were murdered, that's your crime scene. That's where they were removed from. Again, still has to be excavated. There's a phone left there. There's something there. And my feeling on it is they should be there. And if they're not, he didn't walk out of there. Now, in my mind, I am definitely investigating foul play. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, if I take the best case scenario and say they're there, see, I wanted to see, are they still there? Because if they're not, and I told Paula that, if they better be there. Because if they're not, now I am not working a missing persons case no more. Not in my mind. That was the thing I needed to move me to a homicide. Because if you go to OSBI and you ask him right now, is this a homicide case? He'll tell you no. But he wouldn't get behind me on a missing persons case. Which is it?
Exactly.
If you won't call it a homicide, if you're saying it's a missing person, then let's go, we found them, right? If this is a missing person, it's not a homicide case. I found them, but they wouldn't get behind the search warrant, which hurt it too, because the DA did call OSBI.
Yeah, I remember you telling us that.
And so if you won't back it, then what? But you won't call it a homicide. You know, you're killing this. You're just killing this case. You can't move it forward. And I don't understand that. Because like I said, you call him right now. Is this, I want to talk to you about this case. What's it classified as? And he's going to say a missing person. So why don't we go find him?
Exactly.
Okay. And there's pretty good evidence that we may have a lead of where they're at. Now, if they were murdered, that ain't going to work out. But, if you want to say they're missing persons, well, let's go get them. And if they're not there, now we have other additional evidence. And I guarantee there's evidence in the creek. I think Colt's still there, even if it is a homicide. There's a lot of stories. There's a story that actually lines up with that.
Tell us. Which story?
For him. Huh?
Which story lines up with that?
There was a story that Paula told me where the story was Molly went and got help. They came back. They said it's too late for Colt. He's already dead. So now you have a dead person and a witness. Paula can fill you in on it. I mean, I remember it. I don't have the details in front of me, but it was one of these. Should have a podcast of it. Paula can get it to you, though, but Paula remembers that we've had this conversation recently. As soon as this came up, I said, well, there is that story. And she said, yeah, that does line up with that. That's why Paula believes that there's a possibility Colt could still be in the creek, is because of that. So you might get that from her, because she documents everything, but she was a real asset to all the different stories. But, I did kind of ignore a lot of that because I was following it from a different perspective. Still am. I never finished the investigation, and then I ended up getting stonewalled on that. It was not going to move forward. And to this day, when people ask me about it, it's what are we to do? And there's some friends. I just got a text today from a really good friend of the brothers, Colt's brothers. And they are incredibly frustrated because they don't feel like they're ever going to get an answer because there's so many things that aren't being followed up on, which your podcast kind of points that out, that we're not, what about this? What about this? And just because you put it out there, it don't mean, if someone came forward that actually had something that they could prove, maybe, and that's assuming law enforcement even believes them.
Correct. I have a question for you. We played a recording of Paula interviewing one of the last friend of Molly's that saw her. And she described a couple scenarios. One of the scenarios was that she was at her boyfriend's house at the time, and she was in another room, and Con came in, and then one of the guys said, hey, whatever happened to Molly? And that's when Con basically said, well, this is what happened. He goes, Colt gave her a hot shot of heroin, and she OD'd. I flipped out, and I shot Colt right between the eyes. Now, that girl was in the other room. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's a first-person account. That's a witness. And she told that same information to the U.S. Marshals. And I'm sure anybody else who interviewed her, I think the U.S. Marshals the one who interviewed her first. How is that not relevant?
Yeah, and I cannot give you an answer. They never followed it. OSBI never, I had trouble getting stuff. they know about that. And anytime I talk to OSBI, I said, if I'm on the wrong trail, please tell me. If you have something that says this is anywhere possible, that I'm wasting my time out here looking for a missing person, I need you to tell me. And they had emphatically said, there is nothing, absolutely nothing. I know the story you're telling me, but I don't know if they vetted it out, said it's not true, or... And here's the thing, that same story that you're talking about, that story got back to Molly's brother. And he believes that story. That's why he don't have any vengeance against Con, because he believes Con killed Colt for killing Molly, and good for him. Early on, that story was believe he jumped Paula for doing all this stuff, and he was against it because he thought Con just killed Colt because Colt killed Molly. But I guarantee you, her Colt's brothers, if Con ever told that story in front of them, they would probably beat him to a pulp, because Colt's brothers do not buy that story at all. Because I talked to them about that. It's one of them that really, one of the stories that really made them mad that their brother did anything to Molly. They said they know their brother really well, and they thought they did. And that may all be true. But my investigation was based on OSBI assuring me they had no actionable evidence. I said, if you find out anything, that was my deal. You're not going to tell me everything you have, but if you have anything that's possibly I'm wasting my time out here, then, you'll tell me. And oh, yeah, we would. You could be on the right track. We don't have any evidence that they ever left the woods. We don't have any evidence, because that was my deal. Do you have any actionable evidence that they ever left these woods, or that Con did anything to them, or that they were ever found? And OSBI assured me that no, they had nothing that they could go on. Otherwise, they got me out there for what? Just walking through the snakes and ticks and jiggers for nothing?
Yeah. Jackie, I mean, not to belittle anything, but from a law enforcement perspective, you were a sideshow. That's why. That's all it was. It was basically an exercise just to make people believe that they're doing their due diligence. And I don't think they counted on you being so good at it.
They didn't count on me being as persistent about it, or not. I mean, a lot of this was done on my own time. I mean, I was working for a different agency. A lot of the miles I tracked out there. A lot of it's because Paula, you cannot meet Paula and listen to her story. And if there's anything you think you can do to help get her an answer, if you're any kind of human being at all, you're going to do it. As y'all well know, you can't hear this story and go, how can this be complicated? You've seen the area. There's only two people. I mean, there's obviously Luann and her brother that, on that property there. And then there's Con and I mean, who else could have even possibly had interacted with them? I mean, your suspect list would be completely really small. And they're saying it's a missing person. They won't even classify it as anything but that. And I'm like, okay. And when I come up with an answer for them, well, I think I found your missing people. You should look here. Not that I know that for sure that they're both there, but something's there. I mean, I try to weigh in those other stories because I know them. And I'm like, don't disprove them. That's my point is, just because I did all the things I did and came up with that location based on pretty forensic evidence backed by other people, and there's still some human remains sent there, if you want to believe at least one of the dogs, that means that one of them could still be there, or that there's remains of them that is still there. I mean, you had a guy that was bleeding pretty bad if he had a compound fracture. It would be your crime scene if it's a crime. If it ain't a crime, then there should be two people there.
Well, let me give you a parallel here. When Gabby Petito went missing, everyone kind of believed that there was a murder involved. But what did they do first? They searched everywhere. Okay, they had helicopters. They had so many resources out there on private property. They searched everywhere. There was a huge effort. If it is a missing persons case, why didn't they do that?
And they found her. And when they found her, they said, oh, now we have a homicide. They suspected it. Same in this case. We suspect it, but they'll tell me, well, you can't even prove that they're dead. How can you prove you can't even prove they're dead. And I can't. I know they are. They are. Everybody with any kind of common sense. When can you not use common sense deductive reasoning? If you talk to Jared with, because I've spoken with him, Jared with Adventures with Purpose, he said, what our secret is? Common sense. That's how he finds all these people. He just takes a more common sense approach. And look how successful they've been with that. If you try that in law enforcement, look where we're at. I didn't look for 2 weeks. Then to this day, the sheriff that was back there then still says, well, I think they're still alive somewhere. They ran off. How ludicrous is that?
It is horrible. And Trace Sargent said, she was the canine handler. She brought up something related to the common sense factor. She says, people don't, or men in general, don't do things without a purpose. Why was there a fire in that particular area? The people that lived there didn't make a fire. Why was it there?
Yeah, well, okay. Yes and no. We do bonfires all the time. I mean, here on my ranch.
No. I'm just saying specifically, the owners of that land had never done a fire there.
And I don't know that wasn't the case or not. It might not have been, and it could have been suspicious, but it in and of itself isn't suspicious because people set fires all around Love County all the time.
And there's blood pathogen in the soil where everybody does these bonfires? There's
also pathogens upstream of that, though, that they didn't realize there was an upstream. So, I don't know if they got drug all the way down there. And it's hard to burn up a body completely. You'd think there'd be some teeth, though.
It's very difficult. From the people that we spoke to, crime scene investigators says it's very difficult to burn a body completely. Like in a fire like that.
Yeah, because I know these crematories, they get really, really, and I think they have to do it for a long period of time to get it to burn bone.
Yeah, but from a complete outsider's perspective, when Cindy and I were there at the burn pit and we saw how close it was to the net property line and how close it was to the car.
And the fact that no one lives there full time, it's like the perfect place.
Well, those guys ran those woods all the time, though, doing stuff.
But that's the thing. They were running those woods all the time. So you're going to tell me none of those people saw a body, the smell of a body? I mean, that's the thing. It's like
where the car is and walk you to where I think they were, or maybe.
I can visualize it. I mean, we know that area pretty good. We were there for a bit. We looked
all day.
We were there and looked at the maps constantly, and I have an idea where you're saying, and I think you're right. I think there is a very big possibility that Colt is down there. I don't believe Molly is, but I do believe that there's a very good possibility he's down there. And that's why we're back to this again. Why won't they allow the search to happen in that area?
Plain and simple.
That was part of the reason I got out of there was because cops, you can't do that. Sitting out here as a retired cop, I can say, yeah, I worked that case, and I don't think it's ever been handled properly, ever. The fact that search warrant could even be written 8 years later, and those circumstances still be, those I's and haven't been dotted and the T's haven't been crossed, 700 feet from the car.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable. And now the phone records seem to indicate that. Canine alerts seem to. What we tried to do in working it as a missing person is take out any variables and make sure that we did a proper search. Well, guess what? We didn't. We never did. We still haven't. We haven't eliminated, and they never can. The only way that OSBI can reclassify this as a homicide is if somebody comes forward and says, here's the bodies, and they actually go find it. If they go looking for it like they did at Taylor Lake, and they say, well, the bodies are in Taylor Lake, if they do a search like they did at Taylor Lake, hey, the person could come forward and tell them where the bodies are, and they still might not find it, and just write that whole story off as just a wild story or something. My point is, y'all have seen how if there's a lead, if you sort of vet it enough to write a report, but you don't really vet it out, how do you know it ain't true? You write it off as not being true, but if you didn't look. Taylor Lake, I mean, how well did we search it? Nah, not much. We decided that the story was hokey, and so there's no real reason to really look that hard. What if they actually were there?
Yeah, but that wasn't. Let me stop you right there, because that wasn't law enforcement's search. That was not their search.
It wasn't, but they got involved and shut it down, right?
Yeah. I mean, how could they shut that down? They don't own the lake. They didn't bring the EyeWitness came there on Paula's request. So why would they shut it down?
When EyeWitness is there and law enforcement's now in the boat, and now they're kind of working with law enforcement, and then they start saying, well, the story is this. It should be right here. If it ain't there, hey, call some divers. We'll check this out. And as far as EyeWitness is concerned, well, he didn't want to look anywhere else, so they got hung up on some, I guess, concrete. I don't know. That's what they said. Nobody saw it except the diver down there, and he didn't see it because he felt it. You couldn't see nothing in that water. Like I said, that was the end of it. What if they were over by the dam?
Yeah.
I mean, he took one detail of a story and once you find where, if it ain't here, it ain't anywhere. This story, if part of it's false, it's all false. Move on to the next. Right?
Yeah. That whole pond should have been checked. That whole lake should have been checked.
I would have. Not that once I have the resources, if I've got resources there, well, while we're here, let's do our job, right? I mean, we're all here. It would have been better off if law enforcement didn't come.
Absolutely.
And I'd heard about it from one of the deputies, and I called Paula, and I says, hey, would it be okay if I asked Paula's permission to come? I did. And she said, yeah, that would be fine. So that's why I was there. I drove my own, vehicle out there to it, because I wasn't with any department at the time. And I didn't know much of the story other than the little bits and pieces of it that Paula had told me, and I knew that they wasn't going to do a search, or they were. And then she says, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And you'd have to ask Paula how they knew. I mean,
yeah.
And so they did a report, and once you do a report and you kind of go, well, we had this lead, we went and investigated, it's been vetted out, right? I mean, that's the way the report's going to be. They went, there was a report, so Lake that whole story has been vetted out.
According to them.
Well, that's the way that's going to be on our report. When you through reports, if you're a new investigator that come onto the case and you read down through it, you're going to write that off because you don't have all the facts. I mean, we know more of the story because you had people there.
Yeah.
It's the only reason you know that part of the story.
Yeah, exactly.
But how much of this case is like that?
Yeah, no, it is. Unfortunately, after all these years, it becomes kind of like the telephone game, and the story is starting to turn into more of a myth than an actual fact. And I think a lot of that...
You can make it like it's an urban legend.
Exactly.
This case has had thousands of tips over the years, and Paula has really put a lot of money and time into vetting them out.
Last year, when we started producing the podcast, Paula received a tip that the bodies were put into a freezer and dumped into a lake.
Paula organized a search with the help from Texas EyeWitness, a search and rescue organization that specializes in search efforts for missing persons using the most suitable and up-to-date technologies and methodologies.
Texas EyeWitness used a side-scan sonar, one of the most effective tools for underwater searches. By using high-frequency pulses, the side-scan sonar can detect objects at the bottom of the lake. We sent a film crew to document the search. Today we're going to talk to everyone who was there about what happened that day.
First, we're going to speak with Josh Nation, the cameraman we hired to cover this.
Hello?
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Josh.
It's Rob and Cindy.
Hey, guys.
How are you?
Doing good.
Good.
Doing good. I'm glad we caught you on your day off. All right, so I don't know if you've been following the podcast at all, but we're getting to that point where backtracking some of the things that we did earlier, and one of the things we're talking about now that's coming up is the lake search. And I know you went out there for us to shoot some footage along with Justin. But we want to kind of get just your perspectives because since you were boots on the ground there, give us like the lay of the land on when you showed up, what you saw, who showed up, and then what they were telling you, what you saw as far as the search, that kind of thing. So if you can kind of take us through that day and what you saw.
Okay, I'll try to remember it the best I can.
Sure.
Remember, it's driving out there. It was pretty early in the morning. It was much further drive than I had originally anticipated because the lake was kind of out in the middle of nowhere and part of the state I wasn't very familiar with. A lot of backcountry roads getting to it, really off the beaten path. And it was kind of in between what I would call like where she was from and like the Lawton area, kind of in between those two areas of the state. Got there and it was lake was kind of being generous with what I would call it. It was more closer to what I would call a pond, a very big pond. But it did have some boat launches. Kind of the first person there. I waited for everyone to show up. Justin was the next person to arrive. We kind of walked around and got the lay of the lake and kind of guessing where everyone would meet. You know, it's kind of hard to tell where we were going to be doing everything. Then I think that the aunt showed up next, and then she kind of showed up, and then everybody kind of showed up all together at once. The search party and the police officers, everyone kind of showed up all together at once.
When the police showed up, was it the local police or the OSBI? Do you remember?
OSBI and local police, because local police had to they were there in case they found something, because they wanted if the search team in the boat found something, they wanted to be able to tape it off real fast, and so nobody could get in there and mess with anything.
We had you there filming everything because we wanted to have documentation of what happened. So what did they say to you?
They said, you can film everything, but if we do find something, we're going to ask you to stay behind the tape and be respectful of our investigation. They were actually very nice. They gave us all the information. They were very open about talking on camera. They were very cordial with us, honestly, which is, in my experience, growing up in Oklahoma and working in news in Oklahoma, does not happen very often, to be very honest. With anybody in the Oklahoma law enforcement, they tend to not like to talk to cameras very often.
Do you recall what happened after that? Did they give you any information about what was going on there, or?
They just confirmed while we were there and the information that you guys had given me that the guy that was in the jail had given him the tip that's where the body or something was. They were going to send the boat out with I think it was like a sonar or something that would scan the bottom. And if they located something via the sonar, they would then send divers down to see what it was.
Did you talk to the EyeWitness people? I can't recall.
I think we talked to one of them. It was an older gentleman. He would not let us go on the boat because his boat was already overweight as it was, and he was worried about it sinking. He did allow me to mount an Osmo on it, an Osmo camera, so I was able to get a little bit of footage as he kind of went along. And I believe the aunt was on the boat.
So you're saying PAULA was on the boat?
I believe so, if I remember correctly. And then the sonar did find something, and so they did end up taking off the area to do an investigation, and they did send divers down.
And what did they find?
I believe the water was very murky, but what I believe they found was just it ended up being just a giant piece of concrete, but they had thought it might be the car.
It was that big?
Yes.
It was as big as a car?
Yeah. From what I understood.
Okay.
But they didn't bring it up?
They did not bring it up, no.
Did they say what they were going to do next, or did they give you any info about what was going to happen after that?
They said they wanted to keep searching. There was an issue with, I guess, PAULA or the private investigator that she had hired the search team, the Echo search team, but they had a limited time frame that they could be there, so they were going to have to reschedule and come back.
Yeah,
because they had a very limited amount of time that they could be there.
Do you feel like the law enforcement were pressuring the EyeWitness people at all?
Not that I could tell, but they did talked to them out of earshot of everyone a couple of times, so it's a little hard to tell. But from, just body language and everything, it never seemed to get heated or anything of that nature.
I thought they had told you guys not to film stuff. Is that true or no?
They didn't tell us not to film, but they did tell us to stay behind the yellow tape. Like, don't cross the yellow line just for investigation purposes. Like, I had a zoom lens on my camera. I zoomed in, and there was one, I think he might have been he was with the sheriff's department. I'm just not sure what his actual title was. He seemed a little gruff, for lack of a better way of putting it, but sometimes those rural county sheriff's department individuals are just like that in general. At least that's my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it was just the situation or if that was just his personality.
Girl, real talk. This whole "it's a new year, time to reinvent myself" trash is not the vibe for 2024. You can find someone who loves you for you, as you are. You don't need to read a stack of self-help books, only eat sad salads, or start meditating at 5 a.m. to be ready for dating. So yeah, my advice is to download Bumble and find someone who embraces you the way you are right now. Let me know how it goes.
Whether you're a diehard sports fan, a hopeless romantic, or a comedy aficionado, the Xfinity 10G network was made for streaming it all. Worry less about buffering when streaming your favorite shows, movies, or live sports, and enjoy a better way to watch. Xfinity gives you a reliable connection for streaming, plus all the entertainment you love all in one place. Fear not, because now you can finally sit back, relax, and stream your favorite entertainment and sports like never before with the Xfinity 10G network.
Listen to the 48 Hours podcast for shocking murder cases and compelling real-life dramas from one of television's most watched true crime shows. Go behind the scenes of each episode with award-winning CBS News correspondents and producers in Postmortem, a weekly deep dive. Listen to 48 Hours wherever you get your podcasts.
So pretty much from the time you got there until the time that they were done and you left, how much time transpired?
I would say probably 4 hours, 5 hours.
What did we find out from law enforcement as far as whether or not, when they found out that EquiSearch is going to come back to take a further dive or scan?
They were going to come back. What we found out from law enforcement from the diver that they sent down, he said it looked like just a giant piece of concrete, like maybe a piece of the ramp from where they would launch boats maybe fell off or something like that and slid further down. Obviously that area was not well maintained at that time. You could tell that from the parking lot and everything. The state wasn't keeping it up or anything of that nature. So, I mean, that would track from what he was saying, but also the water was very murky. You could just see that. We even put if I remember correctly, we even put a waterproof camera in there a little bit, and you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see 2 inches in front of the camera. The water was so murky. I don't know how the divers were able to see anything. Based upon what you've seen, the size of the pond, how long do you think it would have taken them to scan that whole pond? Honestly, I don't think it would have taken, in my opinion, I don't think it would have taken just a few hours, if that. But they had a really good detailed search. Yeah, but they did just one specific area, correct? Yeah, they just did the specific area based on what the guy in the jail had told them. Interesting. Yeah, based on his exact tip, that's the area that they scanned.
Even though the pond was so small.
Yeah, when I say small, I mean it was probably a few acres big, but a lake is usually it would take you an hour or two to go from one side to the other. This would take 5 minutes in a boat. Got it. At full speed. Did they say how deep it was, where the concrete was? I don't recall that, to be honest, if they did or not, but it couldn't have been more than, I would say, 20 feet at the most, because it seemed like he went down and came up within 5 minutes. And then how did they wrap things up? They went over to PAULA. They explained what they had found to her and the sheriff's department and OSBI. He gave his detailed description of what he found, and then they said how they would proceed. That they couldn't proceed much further than that there wasn't a reason to drag it up based on what he said, that it was just concrete And they also didn't have anything that could pull up something of that weight, I believe was also mentioned. Because, a piece of concrete that big would obviously weigh probably close to a ton. They wanted to scan, like I said, they wanted to do the echo search on more area. Because if I remember correctly, the tip had said that they had dumped, they put her in a freezer, if I remember correctly, or I can't remember the exact details of what the tip was. I apologize.
No, it was the freezer.
It was a freezer.
Okay. So they put her in a freezer and had gone off the boat ramp like so many feet and then dumped the freezer. But the thing is that there was like 2 or 3 boat ramps and they only went off of 1 boat ramp.
Got it.
So they wanted to search the other 2 boat ramps, but they just didn't have time. But the other 2 boat ramps weren't really what you would call like boat ramps. Like there's only 1 boat ramp with the parking lot. The other 2 were more like where people had made boat ramps and through the dirt.
Got it. How far were they from the boat ramp with the concrete?
They were on the other sides of the lake.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
All right, Josh.
Well, listen, thank you very much. Thanks for tapping into that memory. We appreciate
No problem.
it.
And thanks for going out there and shooting.
Yeah,
for us.
thank you for doing that.
Hey, no problem. I have a vested interest in this. Like I said, my wife's family knows that family. So
She knows the Millers or the Haynes?
the Millers. Actually, I think they know both, to be honest.
It's terrible.
Yeah, not a fan of the ones suspected of the murder. I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think
Now, you lived in that area, right?
Yeah, well, I grew up on the other side of the state, but we have a house there in Durant where we did one of the interviews for the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my wife and daughter live. So, but she has family that lives therein. If I remember correctly, was it Marietta?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she has family that lives there and in Lone Grove where all that took place.
Mm-hmm.
So they know, that small towns, everybody knows everybody.
Oh, yeah. What does she think about all this? I mean, she's got family there.
She's been keeping a very vested interest, and her cousin has been very vocal about it on social media and everything ever since this went down, even before you guys did the show and everything. It actually took me a while to tie the 2 together because her cousin and I aren't very close. The 2 of them are. There was one thing, and I don't know that this is related. So keep that in mind.
Sure.
But I don't get pulled over often. But the moment I left the lake going home, I was pulled over like 15, 20 minutes later. And I wasn't even speeding. I was actually going under the speed limit, which was odd. So I don't know that had anything to do with it, but it was just weird.
Did they did they cite you for anything?
He didn't even write me a warning for anything. I don't even sure what he pulled me over for. Like, he just kind of asked me some questions and then he left.
What questions did he ask you?
Just like where I was going, like how I was like, I'm just going home. I've been at the lake. I didn't even tell him I was out there filming anything. I was like, was I speeding? He checked my insurance. Be honest, I have a concealed carry permit. I let him know immediately. I have a firearm in the truck. It's in my glove box. Like, it's not, it's safe. It's on safety. It's in the glove box. Let him know that immediately. He's like, thank you for letting me know. Showed him my concealed carry permit. So, like, I showed everything was above board, and he didn't make a big deal out of anything, but he still ran my license and everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still, like I said, it's just strange because I wasn't speeding. My insurance, my tags were in date. Although I did have out-of-state tags. I had Texas plates.
I don't think it's weird. I don't think it's weird at all, Josh.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was a little bit of a fishing expedition.
Could have been. I don't know if Justin got stopped. He had Oklahoma plates. But
yeah, we'll have to check with him when we talk to him.
Yeah. Just weird. Like I said, just weird that it just happened to coincide after I left, and it's like within 20 minutes of leaving.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, buddy. Well, listen,
right,
thank you
bye.
very much. Appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, bye, guys.
Bye. Justin Strain has worked with us on a bunch of true crime TV shows, and he also went with Josh to take some drone footage.
Okay, Justin. Justin, first of all, full disclosure, you were working with us on another documentary, and you offered to go down there because you had a drone, and we had another cameraman down there, Josh, and so you wanted to go down there for us. And so kind of take us through that day, what you saw and what your experience was like for that dive search.
So yeah, my day basically got up early, packed up, and drove. I think it's about 3 hours from Oklahoma City. So drove down to go to the lake, and as I was pulling in, I noticed it's heavily wooded, kind of muggy area. It feels kind of muggy, and it's small town Oklahoma, and so a lot of small towns in Oklahoma, and really just that whole area, it's poor. You can kind of see like the people there, they don't have a whole lot of options as far as what they're going to do with their careers and stuff like that. So when you're pulling up, you can definitely see that it's an area that this could take place.
So when you got there, was law enforcement there already, or were you guys the first one there?
I think there was one law enforcement person there at the time. There wasn't many people there though. It was me, Josh, and I think one law enforcement person, and then the divers were getting ready to go out on the boat and do the search. So there wasn't a whole lot of people when I first rolled in. Got some initial shots of the surrounding area in the lake. Like I said, it's, the lake is covered around with trees. There's a little campsite around there. And then they went out on the boat, and it probably was 2 hours of them just tracking and looking for where the body could have been dumped. And so at one point they found something. This might be, a barrel that would be hiding the body. And so at that point, that's when more police officers came out, and there was a lot of people there at that point, a little bit more news coverage as well. And that's when everybody thought, this is the moment that we're going to be able to find the bodies. And then it turned out that it was a piece of concrete with steel in it that they found.
Okay, so describe basically how large the lake was, because based upon the images that you shot for us, it didn't look like a large body of water. It looked like it was more like a pond.
Yeah, no, it's more of like a fishing lake. It's not anything that you would go and jet ski on. It's more of a paddle boat, maybe kayak, but in fishing, really. I think a lot of the cabins there, the people are going there so that they can get away and go fishing. But yeah, small, remote lake.
Mm-hmm. What was the mood like when you showed up, and like during the whole time you were there? What was law enforcement doing? Was it a tense mood? Was it a relaxed mood?
I would say it was kind of like gloomy but excited. So obviously this case has been going on for a while, and so there's a certain level of excitement to be able to like finally figure out, this is actually what happened. And on the other side, the flip side of that though, it's a murder. So there's going to be a bit of a gloomy feel to it, especially if you find the bodies. Then there's case partially closed, but at the same time, like, it kind of reveals all of the secrets that have been hidden for however long.
Did you get the feeling that there was maybe some tension between Paula and law enforcement?
Towards us, they were great. They were very excited and thankful, basically, for the opportunity to get hopefully something resolved. I remember, especially once they thought they located where the bodies could be, I remember the family being on edge the entire time, basically hands at their mouth and ready to close it. You could tell that the family was excited for the opportunity to finally get the bodies, but also nervous the whole time. And then towards law enforcement, I don't remember them being rude or anything or having any edginess towards the law enforcement. Just, I think as any family would be in this situation, they've been going through the ringer trying to look for some closure to this case, and then when it turns out that there's no closure for them, then they're upset. They're disappointed in.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. This has been so many leads that have gone nowhere, and I think that there's always that sense of excitement when they get one that is like this, where we think that I actually thought it was gonna pan out. I really, for the first time when we got the call and I was talking to Paula, I had intuition that there was something in that lake that was going to resolve something. I'm a little disappointed that it didn't happen. And I still feel like that, and I don't know what your perception is actually because you were there. Do you feel like that there was more that they could have searched? Do you think that it was thorough enough? Do you think it warrants going back and searching again?
I think they did it. I mean, they did a good job on the search, but I also wouldn't be shocked if the bodies were still, like, if the bodies were in that lake. It's like I was saying, it's not a big lake, but it's big enough to where you could hide a body and it may never get discovered. I feel like they focused on one area right by dock, but they didn't focus on the rest of the lake. I think they did like a thorough search for the area that they were looking, but they didn't search a whole lot around the rest of the lake.
Yeah, because Josh said they probably could have done the whole lake in a day.
For sure. Yeah. And that was the other thing is like it wasn't like it was a 12-hour long search. You know, they went out for a few hours and they did their area pretty well, but they didn't search the whole lake. And who's to say, you know, it's not out in the middle of the lake. If you were going to hide a dead body, like if you're going to hide a body, you probably wouldn't just want to pull up to the dock and dump it there. Obviously, you know, you never know what's actually going through the person that's dumping the body's mind. But if you were really going to do it, you would want to put it somewhere where it's a little harder to find. So
yeah, and there were other boat launches that were not like set up like the dock was, according to what your images showed us. That there was other areas, and St. Josh said there was an area that people launch boats. It looked like that was like dirt on several areas there. So, and we also got information from the person who gave the tip, because he actually saw a video of them doing the search. I don't know if was there other news people there?
I think once they had thought that they found something, I think that's when the law enforcement called out other news. I can't exactly remember if there was other news there. Did Josh mention anything about it?
I don't know if he did. I don't think he did.
I just remember like once they were like, oh, wow, like we might actually have something here. I remember there was a lot more people. Because when we first got there, it was just a handful of us, you know, coffee and donuts situation where it's kind of like mellow. We're going to search. Hopefully we find something. We're not going to guarantee anything. And they were like, oh, we might have found it. That's when a lot more people showed up. They started closing off the road. It became more of a crime scene rather than just we're going to go out on a boat and hope we find something.
Yeah, because what's interesting is the person who gave the tip afterwards, Paula met with him, and he said that they were searching in the wrong place. He goes, I saw the video on YouTube, and they were searching in the wrong place. He even confirmed that they were looking in the wrong place, because I think what you said earlier was accurate. It's like, why would you go to the most obvious, just the easiest place to dump off a body off a dock and leave it there? Would be the easiest place for someone to find it. You would make it a little bit harder for them to look for.
Right. Well, not only that, so like maybe you search around that area because that is the most obvious place, but they spent all of their time there, and then it felt like once they figured out that wasn't where it was, they were like, okay, well, we're done. Like we've searched as much as we can. It was at the first sign of we made a mistake and we found a piece of concrete with steel in it rather than a barrel. They basically called it off and they were like, we're done for the day.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was part of that was just like the people going out there cost so much money to do that or what it is. But it seems like if you're looking for bodies, that seems pretty important.
Yeah. And it seems like it warrants a little bit more than just that.
Right.
Yeah. Because initially when we sent you out there, it was just supposed to be you, Paula, and Josh, and the EyeWitness team. And somehow one law enforcement body found out, and then it was like the telephone game. And they called the other guy, and then the other guy, and then the other guy. So that's why there was such a presence there. But originally, This was Paula's search. This was not law enforcement search. So they were coming at the invitation after Paula found out that they knew. She said a couple people, they called and asked, said, can we come? And she allowed them. The fact that there were so many, there was such a big footprint there was kind of unusual.
For sure. I remember, I was just going to say the law enforcement guy that I talked to, he seemed kind of like he was, I don't know, maybe the family pushing just because it had been so long. He felt like he had done as much as he possibly could do for the case. From what I gathered, at least talking to him, I got the impression that he had done as much as he felt like he could do for the family, and maybe the family in his eyes was overstepping and not appreciating what the law enforcement had done for the case up to that point, because it seemed like he was at basically at the end of the case, and they had done as much as they possibly could. So I think that might also lead into why once they didn't discover where the bodies were within the first few hours, they just said, like, this is enough. We're going to have to close it down.
That's the part that's disappointing, because it's not that person's family member that's missing. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
it's missing from your family. Are you going to give up and just walk away and say, well, I did all I could do? No, that attitude is kind of what's been stonewalling this case for the past 9 years.
Yeah.
And that's what's unfortunate. And that's what's upsetting. And I'm just at a loss with it. It really is just an unfortunate situation.
Tell us how it ended and how it wrapped up, and what was the mood there. Josh shared an experience with us that something happened to him after he left the location, and I'll share that with you. But tell us a little bit about what it was like when people were packing up, and any of the conversations you overheard, that kind of thing.
Basically the whole time, so from beginning to end, you have a feeling of when you're going in, it's very mellow. And like I said earlier, it was coffee and donuts. Everybody's on edge in the sense that we know that this could possibly be closure to the case, but nothing has been discovered yet. And so just going out, doing our job, and then once they thought that they found a barrel or something, that's when it became more of a circus. There was the family was on edge. There was more people there. They called in law enforcement. They shut down the street. And then once the divers went down and realized this is just a piece of concrete with steel in it, our camera picked up something that, was not what we thought it was. It felt like it wrapped up really fast after that. Like they didn't, that's when it ended. At the first sign of defeat, they said, we're done. We're not going to search anymore today. I also got the sense that they were planning on searching again, but I guess that's not the case.
No.
So yeah, no, I totally got the sense that we're wrapping for the day, but that wouldn't be the last time that they searched that lake, especially since, as we talked about earlier, it didn't feel like they searched all of the lake, and it didn't feel like they really searched the one area that they had presumed was the area that off of their leads. I remember them saying that we have a lead, and they said it's in this area, but they didn't search any other areas.
What was, just a personal thing, what was it like for you? I mean, had you ever done anything like this before? Have you ever gone, I mean, I know you've had, experience covering things and stuff like that, but have you ever been sent to a potential retrieval of remains of bodies?
No, I had never, up to that point, quite like that, to be at a place where a murder case could be potentially resolved and the bodies found was interesting. Eerie, I would say it was definitely eerie, but also, as I was saying earlier, it was exciting. This is especially for the family. That was one thing that I felt through the family. They were so excited after all of these years that they could finally put, a little bit of closure to their life. Getting a sense talking to PAULA about everything, I could see that the search and everything, she was really thankful at the beginning for the opportunity that it could get closed, and then just the defeat once they started wrapping up from her. It was pretty sad, honestly.
Yeah, it's all very sad. It's a sad case. So Josh shared with us that about little 15 minutes after he left the location, he got pulled over. And he said he wasn't speeding, and he got pulled over. And nothing happened to him, but they checked all his stuff. They checked his license. He thought that was kind of strange. Did anything like that happen to you?
No. Once I left, it was kind of the same feeling, obviously not similar to the family at all, but just kind of a feeling of, disappointment in that we were so close to feeling like it got resolved. And then I left, and when I was driving away, I was like, I got what I came for as far as shots of the surrounding area, but the actual closure of what happened, there was nothing, like they could have went out and they could have not had any search, and it would have been essentially the same conclusion. Like nothing came out of it except for high hopes and then disappointment. I do remember when I was leaving, there was nothing crazy, but I just remember that town and that area. I pulled into a gas station to get a water before I drove back up to Oklahoma City, and it's just just kind of desolate and out in the middle of nowhere. And I remember thinking about like how the people of the area would feel and how it's just fascinating to think about how they live day to day. And it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on there. So yeah, I could see how a case like this would pop up in a small town.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I think, so do you have anything else?
No, I think that's it. Thanks, Justin.
No, we just wanted to get your reflections on it because it's been a while and I know it's been hard but we've been going over the footage and we're talking about that now. And so we appreciate you giving your perspective because both you and Josh were our boots on the ground, and we thank you for doing that for us.
Absolutely. No problem.
What is so upsetting is that Paula and her family get their hopes up every time they get a tip like this. This could be the day that they finally find Molly and Colt, and then nothing happens. It's devastating for them, and it's really devastating to watch, which is why we really need your help.
In a few days, we're going to be posting some of the footage from the search on our website along with some photos.
We're also going to be posting some supplemental materials in the next week. If any of you have any information about this search, please call us.
Next time on Partners in True Crime.
In the coming weeks, we will be releasing many more recordings that no one has ever heard before.
And we will be tapping into our large network of law enforcement and legal experts to help us find out what really happened to Molly and Colt. If you or anyone you know is suffering from a methamphetamine addiction, please contact the American Meth Addiction Hotline.
If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual abuse, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
For any tips relating to the disappearance of Molly Miller and Colt Haynes, please contact 833-4-MOLLY and Colt, and they will be directed to the proper law enforcement agency.
All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content. Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and listen to Vi's original song, Take Me Back, written for Molly Miller.